Hello, and in this video I'm going to show you how to use the grid method and how that can help you to transfer an image to a different piece of paper or to even enlarge an image onto a really big piece of paper. So firstly, I start by marking out 2 centimetres all the way around my image, my photograph. This is going to help me to be able to draw some lines across to create a grid over the top of my photograph. It's important that you're very precise with this because it helps to get a really crisp grid. You could use 1 centimetre, but sometimes that can be a little small. But if you're transferring something quite small onto a small piece of paper, 1 centimetre can be quite useful to make sure you get all the information. As you can see here now, I'm drawing a line between the 2 marks I've created on either side of my paper. I'm doing that vertically and horizontally. And this will create essentially a 2 centimetre grid of squares all over the top of my image. After drawing out the grid on top of my photograph, I'm going to want to draw the same grid or a larger grid onto a piece of paper to help me start to transfer the image across. I want to enlarge my photograph, so I've used a large piece of paper and enlarged my grid, so the squares are now 7 centimetres wide rather than 2 centimetres wide. But you might just want to do it exactly the same onto a piece of sketchbook paper. That grid now is going to help us be able to translate over what should be where on your piece of paper. So looking at my photograph, I have a look at where things exit and enter the square. So I started with the iris because that's kind of a very definite shape. So I'm having a look at where that lovely circle enters and exits the squares that where the grid sits on top. And this will allow me to kind of proportionally to get it in position. Again, if you have a look at the eyelid and that lovely distinct line that runs across, which is quite dark, you can see where it enters and exits those squares, and you can use those as guides to be able to position your portrait drawing correctly. And it also, obviously with my drawing, it's helping me enlarge my image. So hopefully this will help you to kind of quite easily translate across an image that you're using. It doesn't have to be a portrait, it could be of anything, but obviously we're exploring portraiture at the moment. And then some of the other lines I kind of loosely put in kind of eyebrows and areas of tone with subtle lines. And then move on to the lips, and I kind of, again, I'm looking at where it kind of enters and exits those squares, where it kind of skims the edges of those squares, and it allows me to kind of get it precisely in the position it should be. Sometimes it's difficult to work out which square where things should go when you're working on this scale, so you have to be careful, and sometimes I number the squares across the top and the bottom to make sure I'm getting things in the right place. And you can see there I got the ear initially in the wrong place. It's just having a good look at it. And then over these next few images you'll see me starting to apply the paint to my portrait, being inspired by Salgado and Jenny Saville and artists like that. I painted quite loosely and freely and didn't use the conventional skin tone colour palette. I started off by mapping in areas of tone, so where darks and lights are, to give myself a general understanding of the portrait, and then started to work in detail. I'm going to continue to work over the top of this and add lots of different colours to see where this takes me. I also used a digital tool to help me on my phone, just using a simple markup app to kind of explore coloured backgrounds. If you can't print your image at home to be able to draw a grid over the top of it, you can do it on Photoshop. Simply open a photo, click View, go down to New Guide Layout, and then you can create a grid over the top. If you change the settings in the column and the rows box and change the numbers to 14 and 21, this will give you something similar to what I did when I drew over the top of my image. Then you simply press OK, and then you have a grid that you can use from your computer screen rather than physically printing it out to be able to enlarge your image. Just draw the same grid on your piece of paper. Hopefully you found this helpful and you can use this technique for when you do your paintings and independent studies.